CanMar Morning Talk Show, a fresh take on what's happening in the global cannabis and psychedelic space. Your power shot of cannabis and psychedelics knowledge, featuring the industry's hottest experts, thought leaders, trendsetters, influencers, and celebrities. I'm your host, Melissa. Join me and our esteemed guest as we reflect on the current and future climate of the global cannabis and psychedelics industry. Today's guest is cannabis horticulture development specialist, educator, and master grower and QA manager for Sugar Cane Cannabis, BC's first farm gate cannabis facility and also the first of its kind in Canada to be on First Nations land, Brendon Roberts. Chat, and I'm very excited to hear about everything that you're working on. Maybe you can just start by telling me a little bit about your backstory and your story with cannabis. You know, that's something I love to ask all my guests. You know, how did you get started in this industry, and what is your story? What is your cannabis story, Brendon?
Well, for me, my cannabis story is very straightforward. As you can see, I'm a sort of Caribbean cultured guy who was born into a Rastafarian community. And being part of a Rastafarian community, cannabis was always part of our sacramental sort of daily use, whether it's for healing, whether it's for prayer and worship, whether it's for, cooking, whether it's for medicine. So we use cannabis prehistorically and historically within Rastafarian communities for a number of these initiatives, but most importantly, wellness. And being part of a community that carries out what we call an agrarian aspect, which is the cultivation of crops, and cannabis would also be included with that. So there would be a rich history there, as well as the social aspect that also follow these communities, because you cannot keep farming for the whole day, 24 hours. So afterwards, or after farming, which is typically when the sun gets excruciating, sort of hot at midday, then we tend to, or during the evening, you tend to congregate, or amalgamate with each other within the society, and it leaves room for the social aspect of connecting with people, of understanding different unique needs, of pretty much being there as a person that helps to improve the societal structure from both a wellness, medicinal, and therapeutic standpoint. So it comes where, you give afternoon jokes or nightly jokes, or where you tell stories and you listen to the elders, what the elders had to say, especially through their experiences, which came before us, and knowledge that they have to pass down to our future generation for the continuous survival and sort of knowledge sharing, lesson planning, and sort of curriculum development within those communities that keep them alive for such an extended period of time, despite their own challenges and unfortunate situations.
Absolutely. It's that culture of storytelling and education through storytelling in that way, which is so important, I think.
Well, yes, it definitely connects people. I mean, we all have a story, we all have a story, and connecting our stories to cannabis development is no different. I always say that the heritage, culture, tradition, it's sort of it's different for every group of people within the cross section of society. So for example, probably the heritage within the Caucasian group might be different from one of an African, might be different of one from a Native American, might be different from one of a Hispanic, you know. So it might be different from the Asians. So it ranges, though there may be similarities, but within our own societal and historic makeup, these differences in culture, tradition, and heritage, it has its own uniqueness in each different society. That's why I tell people, as a development expert, when I go to communities, I don't force my ideals on communities. I work along with communities to help bring out their story, to help tell their truth. You know, I don't try to force my own ideologies upon them, because some of the ideologies might be contravening to their own heritage and history. And you don't want to infuriate people, because you want to work along with them to help better their community with their own goals and objective in mind. That doesn't mean that I will not share objectively things that can be improved where necessary to take the culture and tradition to greater heights. But my overwhelming mandate is not to change their story, is not to change their culture, is not to change their tradition, you know, is not to change their heritage, but to work along with their ideals to improve these various facets within their developmental makeup of plant medicine that can allow their projects to thrive and can also restore their own pride within their communities. And I think that's one of the fundamental aspects of working together and building stronger, more resilient communities within the globalized community, but on a domestic level, as well as on an international level.
I love that. I love that. And I think that's so important, as you said, within, you know, a global space as well. You know, we're all connected in some way with technology. It's even helped to connect us. We're talking right now on different ends of the earth. So how did you end up in Canada, Brendon? How did that journey happen for you?
So, I mean, I was a horticultural, agricultural science teacher for many years, an educator for over a decade. And after teaching schools within the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Agriculture in the Caribbean region, I decided I would like to seek something else, and that brought me to the next venture. But I was always interested in agriculture and horticulture, because that became my first love. You know, I'm having a dad who was a former drug dealer and a murdered mother. I pretty much had to cultivate majority of the food that I consumed. So it led me on a path to become one with the plant, to be able to understand the plant like most of my peers, you know, to have a more dominant, comprehensive grasp and understanding of plant processes. And I knew to further along that sort of gift that I nurtured along the way, I definitely would need a very powerful institution in Canada that aligns with that cultivation and bringing agriculture to people, you know. But however, seeing that I was doing this work in the Caribbean region, NGOs and Canadian non-profit organizations supported me, you know, where I brought greenhouses to the school, where I developed an entire 40 acres of land, growing crops and stuff for students. So it provided me, you know, solidarity with the Canadians, that I wanted now to invest my own resources within their economy. It's sort of, we look out for you, and you're looking at the next journey, and if you really want to come to our country, we're inviting you. So it's like I decided, let me invest my resources at Canada's premier institution for agricultural sciences, the University of Guelph, and attended the university there. And I had the luxury of picking the courses that I wanted to further my journey, because I was coming in as an advanced student with a degree already. So it allowed me to look at where I want to position my future and what are the important courses that I'm lacking in to help me position my future a lot better. And I knew, well, I was new to the North American society, and the North American society is a broad spectrum of multicultural communities, although probably predominantly Caucasian, but you have a wide cross-section of different races. And I decided, you know what, it's very important to understand people, because if you don't understand people, then you cannot bring forth the message to people, especially being, somewhat Black. It makes me now even a minority, and now bringing out the messaging into a predominant continent that my skin tone is not majority.
Yeah.
So it definitely, it's important to how can we work along with communities? How can we build communities? And this gave me a comparative or an absolute advantage, because from the age of 6 years, I knew that I wanted to do horticulture or agricultural sciences. So I've never stepped outside of my field, not once in my career. It's not to say, well, I just jumped on the bandwagon and, I decided, I want to be in cannabis or be in plants. No, it's dating back from a childhood history up to present. Yeah, up to present day. It's all what I know. It's only what I know, pretty much. So therefore, it allowed me to go through the institution, further understand the different plant processes, and bringing messaging, most importantly, to people, understanding the social science aspect, because I was already had developed robust competence within the science aspect as well. So I didn't really need majority of the science aspect from the university. I needed more of the social sciences to complement my existing horticultural science background already. So it provides a unique marriage between the two that allowed me, from the time that I stepped out from the university, the opportunities were endless. I've went on to grow millions of trees for the Canadian Forest Renewal programs, working with provincial governments, working with mainstream forest companies, and pretty much in the afforestation of Canada's renewable lumber industry. It's something where we always strive for sustainability. We know trees have capabilities in capturing carbon in the atmosphere and building habitats and for wildlife and helping protecting our environment, which is Mother Earth. I always say, Elon is exploring the outer galaxies, which is very good. However, I myself is interested in Earth, because not too many of us will be able to afford or purchase a ticket to go out there in case Earth becomes, a destructive place and an unlivable habitat for us humans. So it tends to focus on, what can we do and lead by example so that we can inspire the next generation, but most importantly, aspire ourselves so that we can continue to perspire. And eventually, we will later retire when we cannot do the heavy lifting anymore.
I love that. I love that. And that's very true. We shouldn't be thinking about where we should be running off to in space or whatever. Focus on the home that we have here and now, right? And I know this is some work that you're also doing, a lot of the work that you're doing, even at Sugar Cane Cannabis in Williams Lake First Nation. I always switch those two around. I know you're doing a lot of community work there as well. Can you tell me a little bit about Sugar Cane Cannabis? What you guys are doing there in Williams Lake First Nation? I'd love to hear more about this project.
So Sugarcane Cannabis is pretty much the first farm gate operation in British Columbia. When we say farm to gate or farm to table operation, it simply means that it allows us to procure or cultivate the cannabis and sell directly at our retail outlet connected to the facility. And it provides advantages being the first. As we know, British Columbia has always been a mecca for cannabis within Canada. You've probably heard about the BC bud, you know. and definitely having a indigenous community being part of a historic agreement is a win for minority communities, because economic reconciliation through partnering with other communities, non-governmental organizations, government organizations themselves, to help impoverished communities, minority communities that have probably been neglected for many years, to develop economic resilient capacities and capabilities so that they can provide a more focused future for their people. And that's why I rise to assist these communities, because when I looked at the cannabis landscape and worked in leading roles across corporate Canada within cannabis and horticulture, I saw that ownership among minority companies was less than 1% within the overall structure of the framework, which is a fast-growing industry, was less than 1% and is probably less than 1% 4 years later. Therefore, we know that to create a positive or transformative change within the industry and a shift for more diversification, it was important that minority communities have a voice. It was important that minority communities is not left behind, because plant medicine development, no woman, child, man, or human being should be left out.
Definitely. I completely agree with you. And that's a really shocking statistic, right? Less than 1%. So obviously people like you are working to change this, but what do you see for the future of Indigenous people within this industry, within the cannabis industry, and how can we improve this? How can we work towards getting more Indigenous people involved?
Definitely. Well, we have seen so far that the indigenous communities have always used cannabis historically. For example, many of the chiefs within Canada I have spoken with have told me, Brendon, we used it at ceremonies. Mm-hmm. We utilize it within our communities to assist our elders, for our well. And also it provides that development perspective that allows their community to thrive in a positive direction, creating employment for their youth, creating sustainable jobs, diversification of income generating revenue streams. These things does wonder in terms of development that will further lead to infrastructural development. building better roads, investing in community daycares, investing in community schools, so that they can provide the same opportunities, though being less fortunate, to their people as the general population is pretty much doing with its other various forms of services. So we tend to want to hold hands, what I say, join hands or join and toil with hands, hearts, minds, and voices, where we have as simple as a company called me 6 months ago and told me, how can we help? And they donated. It was a plant science company called Clunetics Plant Science, and they donated 250 plants out of their genetics to the community. Sometimes it's simple initiatives and gestures such as those that shows we can all work together. We can all support each other because we all want to see each other thrive, so that we can have a better community, society, and country where all can benefit.
Absolutely. And I think that's really interesting as well. You said there are other businesses who want to get involved. How can people get involved? What are some ways that you would encourage people to get involved to help Indigenous communities like this?
Well, I just mentioned one. You could donate. Yeah, one, you could donate. It doesn't always have to be in cash. You could donate in cash. You could also donate in kind. You could also donate with your services. So there are numerous ways of partnering to connect the dots, to show the community that, you know what, historically, we had devastating impacts on these communities through colonization, through imperialism development. For example, less than a few months ago, we discovered at the former St. Joseph Mission Residential School that over 90 odd bodies were discovered on marked graves of children. We have also, and that is just 14 hectares out of over 400 hectares that have been searched so far. Our brothers and sisters south of Williams Lake, the Kamloops First Nation, who normally regularly visit our facility, they also discovered through groundbreaking radar penetration of over 200 odd bodies of their children at their former residential school. And it was estimated that a total of over 4,000 children who attended the school mysteriously died.
Wow.
So we have a lot of grieving in these communities.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of healing taking place, understanding and processing the devastating impacts of the earlier centuries, and now, coming to light with more technology at people's disposal. However, as I always say, we cannot erase the past, but we can work towards a collective future. We can work towards creating synergies that assist one another, that helps to develop one another. And this speaks volume when people can put their differences aside and unite. Though not easy, however, if we have to live in a united country, in a united globalized village, where every man, woman, and child, human being, feels secure, feels protected, feels nurtured, then we ought to put out these differences aside, and we ought to join and toil with hands, hearts, minds, and voices.
100%. And I think that really speaks to the importance of community, you know, a global community in general. And I think especially within the cannabis space, community is really important. This is still a emerging industry, right? We're still kind of in our infancy as an industry. So we should all be working together as well to improve the industry, and, you know, create that kind of conversation that you're speaking about of working together. So do you agree? Do you think that especially in the cannabis industry, community is very important? And have you noticed any challenges kind of against that community spirit within the cannabis industry?
Very good question. Community is everything in all facets of development. Without community, development is almost at a standstill. You know, it's particularly challenging as well in the cannabis community, or developing the cannabis community where we can all amalgamate, because there are many views, there are many ideas, there are many perspectives, and there probably seems to be a lack of organization, of proper movement to channel all these synergies into one cause, into one movement. So therefore, I always say that collaboratively we build. However, in conflict, we remain divided. And I try to focus on the collaborative aspect. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you would know that I try to share as much knowledge that I can as possible where others can benefit from. It doesn't matter whether it's a multi-state operator, whether it's a home grower, whether it's a small business, whether it's a medium-sized structure, but where everybody can absorb something positive and add value to what they're doing currently. And even doing this positive work, I've received so many negative remarks within the very same community. So at the same time, yes, it can be a challenge, but that doesn't really stop us if we know that what is right in our hearts and what is right in our minds, that we should do better. Because when you know better, you ought to do better. And that's pretty much my philosophy on it. So I continue to add value to the people that appreciate the value and can sort of extrapolate the messaging and apply it into a practical application or demonstration at their homes, at their businesses, at their communities. Doesn't matter where they exist in the world.
Absolutely. And I highly recommend to everyone out there to follow Brendon on LinkedIn. I love your posts. I always see them. And you really are sharing that knowledge and that kind of creating that community spirit, which is awesome. I think we all love to see that. And speaking on challenges, of course, Sugar Cane Cannabis has been kind of, it's been a landmark kind of thing for this area. What were some challenges in kind of creating this facility and getting everything kind of set up there with compliance and regulation and being on Indigenous land? Were there a lot of challenges to kind of make this happen?
Well, although being Indigenous, we fall probably under preferential treatment in terms of licensing. However, there were still some challenges within these areas where the licensing sort of process is a very slow and tedious one. And sugarcane facility and operations definitely was impacted, by the slow nature of these challenges in regards to licensing. However, we're in a part of the Caribou region, and Williams Lake is the second largest home to the rodeo in Canada, hosting the second largest rodeo grounds in the country. So it's a cowboy tongue. We normally say hee-haw. And so being in and located in central BC comes with its own unique challenges, because the climate and the weather in central BC is very different from the coast or southern BC. It can get very cold in the winter, sometimes up to -40.
That's
So
freezing. Not used to those temperatures in South Africa.
So it definitely has effects on the external weather, or factors definitely have effects on the internal pressures inside of the building, and therefore working along, understanding how to dial in the different processes, understanding how the nature of the environment impacts the processes that is being carried out on the internal part of the building, calls for a very higher level sort of validation and evaluation to ensure majority of the operational front remains unhindered by the externalities of the weather. So I would say, making sure the environment is dialed in, using grower knowledge, experience, and expertise to help buffer situations that could have been worse, to soften the blow, alleviate some of the challenges. And definitely, I always tell people, don't matter where you operate in, you're always going to have challenges. It's inevitable, especially when you're dealing with plants, and particularly if you're growing plants inside. It's inevitable. It's going to come. However, the skill set of the grower, the skill set of the engineers that designing the building, and the construction crew has to have some form of competence so that you can get a holistic and inclusive developmental project. It's not like bringing in outside individuals who have no experience with those climates. Then you can worsen the challenges a lot more, because you're now working against local capacity building and development. Goes down. You don't want to send for a part right in South Africa. If it's not readily available to you within 28 to 48 hours, you could be putting your community development project at a major disadvantage.
Completely.
So these are all in terms of working along with rural communities, which is very important in cannabis plant medicine development, because we know the rural communities, don't matter where we are, whether globally, rural communities are agricultural lack the economic investment and impetus for these various projects. We also know that a lot of small scale farmers reside within those communities. We also know that these communities, they lack amenities. We also know that these communities lack a lot of the recreational facilities. So these communities are already challenged as compared to the cities, which are more developed to accommodate more large cross-section and broad spectrum of different societal makeup. So therefore, within plant medicine development, we cannot leave out the rural context. The rural context globally becomes very important, because majority of the individuals who reside in the rural communities, they are predominantly the ones who need to build more resilient livelihoods. to face externals or exogenous shocks that can help support and buffer them from catastrophic instances. And we also know, particularly our women, in times of disasters, they are the ones left behind, taking care of the families, taking care of the children. And therefore, we ought not to leave our women out in plant medicine development. Because at the end of the day, if they have some of these huge roles and responsibilities that can amass very quickly in disaster situations, we need to protect their mental health. We need to ensure that they are adequately developed without regard to race, color, class, creed, or sexual orientation. And these are some things that I stand for and I rise because firsthand, working with communities, I've seen this all over the Canadian country, as well as Latin America and developing regions, small island states of the Caribbean.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of what you say I think could even be applied in the South African context as well. We have a lot of rural settlements, people that are farming, and that's why I have high hopes for the future of cannabis industry in this country, because I think that it could really lift up a lot of these kind of communities. So I'm completely on the same page as you with this.
Awesome. Yeah, and we could recall, I mean, I've did history for a long time. We could recall there were certain times in South Africa the women could not come into the cities, and today, women all over the world has not earned a seat at the table when it comes to development, because based on statistics, based on data, big data, women are powerful movers and shakers of development. And excluding them from the industry is a no-no. If we ought to develop the industry as fast as possible with the greatest capabilities, we definitely need the inclusiveness of both genders.
I completely agree with you. So, talking about a little bit about the future of the industry, what are your thoughts on the future of the industry in Canada? You've worked in a lot of different provinces in Canada, but you've also worked, in many different communities around the world. So having all of this experience and working with all of these different areas in the industry, what do you foresee for the future of cannabis on a global level, and especially in Indigenous communities?
Well, the future of cannabis can be very positive, and there can also have some downsides to it. If we focus on the positive aspect, we can see the participatory of development aspect of everybody within the globalized community. We need people to participate. That's number one. As the first pillar that I normally tell people that we need to get the ball rolling within the industry. After the participatory development of nations, which are now starting to come on board, like Europe and Africa, we have South Africa, we have Zimbabwe, Malawi, Uganda, Rhodesia. So all these countries are now coming up with their legislation to pretty much enroll their participation within the global industry, and so Southeast Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean region. So participatory development is one. And after participatory development, I always said pillar number two, I encourage women in cannabis and women and cannabis. So yes. So that is my second pillar to hold up the industry. And my third pillar I'm diving into gender inclusiveness, because we need both males and we need both females in order to further the industry. And can we develop specific roles within males? And can we also develop specific roles within females that will help to propel the industry even further along, working with our inherent strengths? You know, therefore, women, they are very good at business, they are very good at sales. Even our store, Farmgate store, managed in British Columbia, is managed by a woman. You know, sometimes we have to give the women their flowers when they're alive and let them sort of be creative in their own roles that we know that they can excel. That is support. You know, number 3, which is gender inclusivity. Number 4, we're looking at LGBTQ communities. We know around the world, we have a large population within the LGBTQ community. And probably if they were a country on their own, they would be the 4th richest country. You know, however, we know that they are the first, particularly their teenagers and their adults, suffer from depression, suffer from not being accepted within the general society. Therefore, they need access to plant medicine. They are the most vulnerable. However, they might be also the most denied.
Very true.
You know, and as a society, no one human life is greater than another, irrespective of their sexual orientation or what they choose to identify with. Therefore, we also have to allow their communities as well to thrive and champion the rights for equal access to cannabis and plant medicine products for their communities and their well-being as well.
Yep. We're all human beings, right? At the end of the day, when it comes down to it, we're all human beings.
Exactly. And number 5, we have minority communities. And minority communities, as I said before, would comprise of Native Americans or the global indigenous people. Because everywhere you go within the global context, we have indigenous people. You know, how are we looking at the development within an emerging industries and not leaving out our indigenous global population?
I think that's one of the biggest problems, right? And to me, it's just shocking, especially when you told me it's less than 1%. I was just a bit taken aback by that, right?
And if you look at within the American context, 2 years ago, they released some data, and it was also less than 15% of minority having a voice and say within their own industry. But guess what? 80% of the minority population was targeted on the war on drugs. So therefore, the overwhelming population of people at the prisons for this sort of crimes are minority-based groups.
I actually read an article about that not a week or 2 ago, and that's exactly true.
Whether it's Native Americans, whether it's Black Americans, whether it's Hispanic, Latinos, they made up 80% plus. However, within the industry itself, they are represented almost less than 10%. You know, so we have to speak about the inequalities, the gaping disparities, and the inequities, so that we can create some form of balance. That's very important to seek social justice.
Absolutely. And you know what, I think we're sorry to interrupt you, Brendon, but I also think that because the industry is still growing and evolving, and it is still an emerging kind of market, we have the chance now to kind of fix things before it gets completely out of control. And,
Well, 100%. But then again, the industry received very poor or lack of engagement from governmental bodies and officials. And that would have been the first step. And seeing that we saw the neglect in this area, it now forces people to rise. It now forces people to speak up. It now forces people to champion a cause that is almost parallel to what the regulations are saying, because they are just meeting a very small percentage. And based on my social justice eyes, it's developed in its infancy stages to suit the industrialization of the product, but not meeting the tradition, the heritage, the culture, and the passion for a once this historical crop that was pretty much forbidden, but yet still was widely used among the global community, widely grown across the global community, and still today, a large percentage of these people have been left out. And how
a huge disparity there, absolutely.
And that's looking at this as well. We also have to look at agricultural development in the developing world.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at agricultural development in the developing world, for instance, places like Africa, before we have seen huge land grabs. Whether it was early in the days to grow cocoa or to grow different cash crops that brought value to the Western civilization. But historically, we have always seen land grabbing. We have always seen the industrialization that leads to the degradation of our environment. We have also seen small farmers being pushed out, where today the small farmer population in North America has shrunk so much that it's almost non-existent.
And a lot of the land has been destroyed. I've been seeing a lot about that and watching videos about how some of the land is it's destroyed almost beyond repair, right? Which is a huge problem. And that comes from industrialization in many ways.
Well, yes, when we look at the industrialization context and the effects that it has, because it's big money getting pumped into it, doesn't mean that there is not a future for industrialization cannabis. There is a future for industrialization cannabis, because we need them to coexist. According to the United Nations, we're probably up to almost 150 million users of cannabis so far that they are aware of, and the population of consumption, where statistics and data is becoming more available, has been constantly growing. In the area of food development, we have almost 9 billion to feed. So when you couple providing food, providing medicine, we need our lands. We need them to be sustainable. We cannot kill our soil or the micro beneficial properties that comes along with the land. So we need sustainable approaches also inculcated within the industrialization model that will help to provide environmental stewardship and champion these areas, because business and environment goes hand in hand. And these are two important pillars as well of the cannabis industry. We know on a smaller scale level, the smaller farmers are more in tune with these practices because their inherent livelihood depends on it. It's not like they have multi-millions they can run out of this area and run to a next.
Yeah.
Sometimes where they at, that's home for them.
Yeah, that's where they'll
yeah.
stay for the rest of their lives. Absolutely.
And we have to take all these things into consideration in developing the global architecture, working along with communities, working along with people, allowing to disseminate the information. Activists, advocates, all have an important part to play in bringing forth the message that resonates with the people so that we can understand where we're going, where we're heading, and how can we create these collective futures together. We also have cannabis and tourism.
Yes, that's a very interesting point. And that's something like a facility like Sugar Cane Cannabis that's kind of pushing for that canna tourism, if you will. What are your thoughts on canna tourism?
Well, we already know that 29% of the population that is seeking destination tend to seek areas that are more friendly in regards to cannabis laws and legislation, which is important because you don't want to go smoking cannabis in somebody else's country or carrying a gram, as in our sister Brittany, who went to Russia and is now, in a lot of hot water over there. So we know that while restrictions and while countries are now coming out and publicly decriminalizing their laws, it provides more access for canna tourism. And 29% of people seeking destinations are seeking cannabis tourism destinations. We also have cannabis tourism as the new frontier. It's going to become one of the new frontier because it's already a multi-billion-dollar industry. You can learn ways of cultivating the plant. You can also learn about the different products types available, purchasing cannabis legally, adopting various ways of utilizing cannabis, but most importantly, understanding the historical and cultural context of the various locations. Remember, we said earlier, a Native American culture and cannabis usage context and history might not be the same as a different group of people.
Exactly.
So understanding where they can tell their own stories of how cannabis was used and utilized within their own communities would be the same for how the South African context will be able to tell their own stories and how cannabis is utilized within the tropical region over there. And the different forms of adopting and utilizing cannabis. So there is great potential in the global future for tourism and cannabis. And I see it as becoming something that exponentially grows as the global market gains increasing popularity. And people are also educated within that aspect as well, because education within cannabis is very important for us to be able to drive the results and growth that the industry aspires. I also spoke about even looking at historically, cannabis was, forbidden.
Yeah.
And where are we heading now into the future? I would even like to see a woman's cannabis day and a men's cannabis day to pay tribute within the calendar year to denounce the historical stigma, to break barriers, to tear down hurdles.
I think that's such a great idea.
To move
Cannabis, it's like a cannabis Christmas. No way.
Yeah, and to move forward collectively, to show our women how we men can support them, and to show where our women can show how they themselves can support our men. Because we're not looking for a gender war in cannabis. We already have so many differences within the societies among the gender. We cannot afford for more division and stuff within the industry, you know? And that's why I will come out and publicly say I support buying weed from women.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you know, it takes all of us to really bring our perspectives, bring our ideas to the tables, and see how we can all move forward. We've taken all the benefits from the various ideas, because no development perspectives lies in one person's head, you know, and no voice should be left out. That's how we learn, that's how we grow, and that's how we develop more resilient futures.
I completely agree with you, and I could honestly listen to you speak about all of this for the next 3 hours, but we are running out of time. So one last question for you, Brendon, and maybe we can even have a follow-up sometime next year, because I have so many more questions I would love to ask you. But just for today, if there are people who want to get into the cannabis industry, who want to, whether it's becoming a grower or doing cultivation or getting involved in any way, what is some advice you would give to somebody wanting to be involved in this cannabis industry?
I normally say that you have to develop a foot in the door mentality. You want to start somewhere, because majority of people don't really have specific cannabis experience, because it was not an industry that majority of the global population could have partaken legally. So starting somewhere to start into a mass experience, foot in the door mentality, that would be my number one. Once you get your foot in the door, I would say my number two would be try to add more value than the day before. So you add value today, but you add in more value tomorrow than you did the previous day. Because the passion has to lie within you to make a change. Therefore, if it lies within you, it's gonna shine where everybody's gonna see it. You know, I normally say number three, always assess your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. That's very important in understanding how you curtail your future and move along while easing the difficulties and challenges that comes along with it. And I would then say, after doing all of these things, most importantly, try to find your niche, where you fit in, where you feel that you belong, where you feel that you know you're supported, where you feel loved, where you feel that you can put your best foot forward every day.
I love that. And I think that's so important, because, you know, especially when we're working, it consumes a lot of our life, and we should be passionate about that. And we should feel happy in that space. So I think that's a very, very good piece of advice for anyone out there, whether it's within the cannabis industry or not, right?
Absolutely. It's something that's industrial, generalizes the movement and path in chartering a successful journey. And I would always tell people that there are challenges. I've seen people moved and sold their homes, and within less than a year, they didn't had a house to go back to when the layoffs happened. You know, unstable their lives, their families, their children, you know, moving to different states, different province, different areas of the country. And in less than a year and a half, 2 years, you no longer have the job that you
moved, yeah.
You moved for somewhat permanence. So it definitely could have, very ricochet effects on people's livelihoods and on people mental health and well-being. So you want to become more strategic in approach. Therefore, it allows you to gain the best possible advantage, but most importantly, end up where you feel happy. End up where you feel that you can create positive or transformative change, where you can change lives and improve life.
I think that's beautiful and very, very true. And Brendon, as I said, I could speak to you for the next 3 hours. I've absolutely loved spending this time with you and hearing everything that you had to say. Let's definitely do a follow-up when we can. But I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today, Brendon. I really enjoyed hearing everything that you have to say, and I look forward to seeing all the work that you're doing in the future as well.
Likewise, Melissa, thanks for having me, and I see you as my ally, and let's continue to do great work within the cannabis space.
I love that. I totally agree. Let's do it.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching or listening to the CanMar Morning Talk Show. Join us next time for your weekly dose of cannabis and psychedelics updates from the industry's experts. But wait, before you go, did you know that CanMar is leading global change within the cannabis and psychedelics industry? We are building customizable ecosystems, providing solutions to recruitment, offering regulatory and compliance services, and building a marketplace and community hub for the global network. Some might say we are the future. If you haven't already, download the CanMar Hub app or check out our website at canmar.io to see what we're getting up to. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button below to hear more juicy insights from the movers and shakers of the cannabis and psychedelics industry. Until next time, stay dope.